conclusione in rete, Andrea Pirlo, un gol pazzesco! Del Piero, gol! Alex Del Piero! Palla di Pogacar, Pogba, rete, un gol incredibile, Pogba fa esplodere lo Juventus Stadium.
All right, welcome everybody to the Turin Giants podcast, episode 273. My name is Zach, and I'm joined here by Frederic. Frederic, how's it going, man?
Hi, Zach. Well, it's going pretty smooth. So thank you for inviting me once again. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to talk Monza today. Before we get into the match, housekeeping as always. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter at Turin Giants. A lot of really good content coming out of the Instagram page. Also, a lot of good engagement as well. So please always continue the discussion from these episodes there. You can also visit us at turngiants.com, where you can see some cool swag and merch. Alrighty, housekeeping done. Let's get into Monza with, as always, our good friend Dusan.
Buongiorno. Come ha detto lei, buongiorno.
Alrighty, Frederic. Monza. This is a kind of a script, at least heading into the game, a script we've seen before. Juventus is playing a team at the cellar of Serie A, a game that we were supposed to win. And too often this season, we have left these types of games with a draw. What was your feeling going into this game?
I think the feeling I had that we were looking at another draw, to be honest, because we haven't really been that convincing this season, especially against teams at the basement of the table. So I was a bit frightful, to be honest. But yeah, we got 3 points, so and that's the greater takeaway we can get from that game, to be honest.
I mean, you didn't think that after, and obviously different competitions play out, well, to be redundant, differently, right? Copa games versus Champions League versus Serie A, but you didn't have any bit of optimism after that. Pretty solid and showing in the Copa that was going to turn over into Serie A at all.
Actually, I didn't, and the reason why I didn't was because after the City game, I really thought that was a turning point for us. No matter the competition, I thought that this was a turning point with regards to our style of playing, the aggressiveness and mentality. But we were left disappointed back then, and I had the same feeling going into the Monza game as well. Can't really explain it, but just had this feeling.
Alrighty, so let's look at this starting lineup. I think there are a couple key things to point out. Again, we're seeing Coop in a deeper midfield role, McKennie at left back, and the addition of Nico Gonzalez back in the starting 11, starting this time in the 10 position, as we kind of suspected in our last episode. This on paper is a team that easily should have won this game, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at the starting lineup, the names alone, let alone the whereabouts of where the players are positioned, you feel pretty confident that this team could beat Monza easily. And it was expected as well, but we had a rough game, and yeah, I don't know. I'm basically at a loss for words now because, like you said, if you look at the players and the force that we have behind those names, it should have been an easy victory, but we were left disappointed yet again, to be honest.
I know we're going to talk Mota kind of more in more general terms later, but specifically putting Nico at the 10 versus Yildiz and keeping Yildiz out wide, was your gut feeling that was the right move for this game, or would you have liked to see them switched, where with Nico out wide and Yildiz at the 10?
I'm gonna reply with the same reply that Nico Gonzalez gave yesterday. He was asked the exact same question, and he asked, "I'll even play as goalkeeper if need be. I'll play where the team needs me, but my favorite position and the position which renders me the most dangerous is on the left flank." So I think he answered that question in both ways. Like he said, okay, I'll play wherever the coach wants me to play, but in my opinion, his best position is that left flank.
All right, well, let's jump into the game. Kind of first 13 minutes of it leading up to and including the first goal. Yeah, I think we kind of saw in the first 5 minutes, at least my takeaway was that same sort of starting sloppiness that has become pretty characteristic of this Juventus team for those first 5 minutes. In fact, I think Monza had a pretty decent chance early on in the game with the first couple of minutes. But after that, I saw Juventus kind of settle into the game and start controlling it. What was your take on the start of the game from a Juventus perspective?
I totally agree with you on that point. I mean, we started like we do every game. To be honest, we started real sloppy and almost not focused enough to start a game. And then when the dust settles, we ease into the game, and we do that ourselves because we maintain possession with a lot of horizontal passing and getting the ball to be played around without ever being really dangerous. But we settle in, and then it gets better. It did get better for a period, um, but it wasn't convincing. And this is one of the things that bothers me most, like the start of the game, because we could have faced um, we could have faced a goal yesterday in the first few minutes already, and yeah, that concerns me a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, and there was, in that 5 to 10 minute mark where we kind of some of that early shakiness was gone. We still showed kind of this penchant for giving up the ball cheaply at times. But on the flip side, I saw, and I think the best way for me to describe it is some purposeful combination play in possession in that 5 to 10 minute mark, where it looked like there was link up play that I would track back to stuff that they worked on in the training ground. I mean, so often we've talked about a lack of cohesion in attack between our midfielders and our wingers, our fullbacks, and the like. Passing with a purpose to move the ball forward. Too often it's empty. I saw what I thought was actually really good link up play that showed a greater cohesion to then play the ball into the channel in a positive light, or to play through the middle in a positive light that gave me optimism. Well, and let me fast forward to kind of at the end of that series of play, we get what we had a lot last year, but haven't had too much of this year. A goal off of a corner kick. Coop Miners delivers it into the box. McKenny seems to just body everybody out, and does a little touch volley into the goal. What do you think that was just kind of luck from McKenny, or do you think this is sort of demonstrative of his physicality and his presence in the box over the course of his Juventus tenure?
Well, McKenny, first and foremost, I have to start with saying that I wasn't a fan of McKenny during his first stint at Juventus. I saw him play a couple of times in Germany, and I thought he was a bit too chaotic. And I figured he would have had some difficulty adapting to the tactical side of Serie A, but he surprised me, and I think he's one of our best all-round players. You can put him as a left back. You can put him in midfield. He always does his due diligence. He always performs. He has games that he's well not as strong as in others, but like yesterday again, he did his job beautifully. He defended, or at least he tried his very best, and he comes up every time in the box and creates danger. And that's something that's an added weapon and added value to the team. So kudos to him, and also the delivery from Goldminers was a beautiful corner, and it was I think it took us a while before we got to see another corner taken like that and score from a set piece. So I was thrilled to see that goal, and it gave me a bit of confidence for a short period of time.
Yeah, I agree with you on McKenny in the sense that he has been really good for us. He always does a job. He was playing in the pseudo Cambiaso role as this fullback that would move up into the midfield, but he was even more aggressive than Cambiaso tends to be. He was frequently making runs in the box from open play. We know he's good in the air, put himself in a good position, used his physicality, won that ball, gets the goal. He also, and we'll talk about this goal in just a second, but he also was part of the uh, uh, the goal in the 39th minute when we got our second, of playing the ball back into the box into aggressive position, ultimately allowing Nico to get on it and score. And so that's from an offensive standpoint, scoring a goal, being involved in the second, and on the defensive side, leading, I think, the game in both tackles and interceptions, if I'm not mistaken, or Juventus in tackles and interceptions. And so it's just a really effective two-way demonstration from McKennie, and it's becoming pretty common for us to say that when talking about him. So we're up 1-0. Good teams, right? Good teams, great teams, Juventus teams take a 1-0 lead, and the game should be over, right? But how did you think Juventus played after scoring this goal? Because I wasn't entirely convinced.
Me neither. They went back to that first 5 minute mark with sloppiness and lack of concentration. And it was almost as if it were a mental issue. Like they were expecting that equalizer and they were like, okay, go ahead. We know that there's an equalizer coming. Why bother? And that is a thing that yesterday was so blatant to me that it really ruined the game, the emotion of the game for me. At a time, I was, I don't know how to put this eloquently, but I was basically a bit frustrated. I could sense the frustration in the play, and it sort of shifted over to me. And then, well, if we can fast forward a little bit, the inevitable happened.
Yeah, they get the Monza gets the goal. A beautiful, I say it was a beautiful cross. I think it was not only a beautiful cross, it was a fantastic finish. I think it was Birondelli with the volley. Very little that Di Gregorio could do. Looking back at the replay, Kalulu was just an absolute no man's land, marking nobody. Ultimately, in my opinion, accountable for closing down Birondelli and either winning that ball before it gets to him or deflecting it. Kalulu started the season so fantastically from a defensive standpoint, from his play in possession, as well as his progressive play coming out of the defense to help contribute in attacking positions and moves. Do you think his play over the last several outings has been at the same level as what we saw earlier in the year? Do you think he might be dipping in form a little bit?
He is dipping, and I don't know if it's a result of his personal form dipping or just the general deconcentration of the team that happens at certain points in the game. You could see him a few matches ago where he was very concentrated, always on top, always anticipating, and it seems to have been lacking as of late. And I don't know if it's down to him personally or the team, but there's a lot of difference in the Kalulu we saw 5 to 6 games prior to this game and the Kalulu we've seen the last 3 or 4 outings.
Yeah, it's something we'll want to watch because you look, nobody plays, or well, almost nobody plays perfectly over the course of a season. So I'm not, I'm not giving up on Kalula or anything like that. But it's just the last few games there have been some notable involvements where he got lost, and his man or the man closest to him has gotten an opportunity to score. Okay, so that's the 22nd minute mark. Game is tied 1-1. Yeah, Juventus is again a position where, and frankly, at a game, and they're all games that now that we have to win, but a game that we have to win against a poor Monza team. Our response was we seemed to react well to this. I do think there was absolutely I don't know if it was an expectation they were going to score, but a huge let off from the Juventus standpoint leading up to Monza's goal. But I think we responded well to it, and we've frankly responded well to getting scored on all season, where we've salvaged some draws like the Inter game or the Bologna game. And over the next 17 minutes until the third goal, I think we did some really good things. I don't think our possession play, and I'd like your opinion on this, was entirely purposeless. Patient passing, requires patience, right? I felt like there was again those purposeful combination plays that we were trying to execute, albeit fruitlessly, for most of that. Um, and we were largely in control up until that third goal. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, definitely agree. And that's the main thing. You have a player at number 10 who's technically very able, Nico Gonzalez. You also have on the left flank Yildiz who can bring in some spontaneity and some refreshing attacking skills. And on the right, Conceição. But in all regards, if you put those three names together, I think we can agree that we should be expecting more. I mean, it was, as you said, some nice link-up play every now and again. But to be honest, we played against Monza. We should be, as Juventus supporters, asking and demanding for more.
So one thing that I noticed the team was doing, and I was really happy to see this actually, is they were overloading the left a lot of times. So you'd have McKennie squeezed over there with Yildiz. Nico would be over there oftentimes. Um, and then you would have Conceição, who generally has been told to stay out wide right, but instead was pinching in almost to the middle of the pitch, with Savona keeping the width of the field. And this allowed us, instead of having to cycle possession all the way back through our defense around when we wanted to switch or we wanted to release pressure from the, converging on the left flank, to find Conceição in the middle of the pitch, which gives you more options. You can go towards goal, you can pass out wide, you can cut it back onto the left side, give some give and goes, create some chances that way. And I felt like this was way more of a positive change than in previous games where Conceição would have been out wide. Savona pinched in closer on the defensive side, requiring either a long ball switch from a guy like Locatelli or having to cycle it all back through the defense. We saw several times where Conceição would get the ball in that centralized space and, in my opinion, create or have the opportunity to create some positive chances. We ultimately saw one of those prove fruitful in 39th minute. Conceição pitches into that center of the pitch with Savona out wide. Conceição gets the ball, gives it to Savona, who crosses it. McKennie then delivers the ball back into the box. The defender shanks it. Loca kind of bodies his guy, gets a touch on it, and Nico Gonzalez gets, what I would kind of consider a poacher's goal. Right place, right time, puts it in the goal, 2-1.
Yeah, right time, right place, right moment. And to piggyback on what you said with the Conceição position, you could see often during the game that Nico Gonzalez asked Conceição to get more central behind him and pushed Locatelli a bit back. I don't know if we saw the same replays, but in a couple of replays, you could see that Nico was calling out Conceição to move more to the middle and asking Locatelli to have his back in case of a counter attack. So that's very, very good, and that's very offensively minded, which is great because, as you said, it creates more variety through the middle. But then again, the link-up play after that was a bit missing in terms, and I think that was the initial introduction to our second half because we couldn't keep that momentum up because it takes a lot of energy for a winger to get into the central position, then drop down again back to the wing to do some defensive work or just to follow the man into space. And it was clear that we couldn't keep that movement up all game. So the second half was no surprise to me.
Well, we'll get to the second half because there's something that needs to be said. We said after the first goal, a good team, a great team, a Juventus team that goes up 1-0, game should be over. Okay. Juventus goes up 2-1 in the 39th minute. A good team, a great team, a Juventus team goes up 2-1 in the 39th minute. The game should be over, right? But the rest of that first half was pretty uneasy, wasn't it?
It was. It made my eyes bleed. Like I was generally feeling, and I played football all my life, so I've seen coaches come and go. I've been part of teams that were very talented and teams that were less talented. But every time that my team took the lead at the end of the first half, every coach I had said, "Go for the kill," because if you get into that lead with a 1-goal difference and you can hit them back just before halftime with another goal, Then you have them going to the dressing rooms with their heads down, motivation lacking, and the game should be in the bag then. But it seemed as if we were content and we were kind of surprised ourselves. Hey, look, we took the lead. Okay, that's good enough. Let's just end it here. And that's something that frustrates me.
Yeah, within a couple of minutes of that goal, we saw Monza get the ball in the box in a dangerous position, and it was Koopmeiners actually who threw his body at the ball twice for back-to-back blocks, deep in the box, and what frankly should have been Monza goals, to keep us in the lead going into halftime, and it just was, kind of a repeat of what we saw earlier in the game. Of we go up by one, Monza responds, and Juventus, either doesn't have an answer or is hanging on by the skin of their teeth. Um, so, I do want to note that it was good to see Coop back there defending in that regard. I think a big part of Juventus culture is that defense, and to have him hyped up, making those plays. He definitely endeared him to me, contributing on that side of the ball, and hopefully, and I believe probably endeared himself to a lot of the fans, throwing himself down and getting those key blocks at a key point in the game.
Yeah, true. I mean, but considering, I mean, there were fantastic blocks by Koop Miners. And I mean, I was only grateful that he stood there and held those balls back. But when the ref blew the whistle, you could see some Juventus players going like, "Phew, we made it!" And if you're a Juventus player and the ref whistles for halftime, and you have to go, "Phew," against a Monza side, which is all but relegated at this point already, then I think questions need to be raised.
Yeah, that's and kind of at the end of the game, I had a similar thing. It's like, you beat Monza 2-1, and yes, we haven't won in a while because we have all these, in the league at least, because of all these draws. But it's a Monza team. I don't want to see people jumping around and celebrating because that's not Juventus. Juventus should win these games and move on to the next, and at halftime going in relieved to be up 1-0 or up one goal, excuse me, against a Monza team, kind of raises question marks. But we'll get to kind of that at the end at the end of the game. We when planning this episode kind of divided by the goals, and there were of course none in the second half, and so we're going to kind of take that all at once. I don't think too much happened in the second half of note, um, other than a couple really good, I think, connections and shots and opportunities from Nico, kind of in the 50 to 60 minute block, until his sub in the 64th minute, as well as Monza actually starting the second half quite aggressively. Frederic, what was your sort of synopsis of second half play?
The good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the good was that Nico took those shots because we we don't see Juventus taking a lot of shots outside the box these days, and it was a thing that frustrated me in the past because you could see the open space and you have players who can shoot. I mean, Koop Miners can shoot, Nico Gonzalez can shoot, um, Conceição can shoot, Yildiz can shoot, but we never tried that, and that pretty much frustrated me in the past. So seeing Nico do that was very, very good. Also because it was a bit unexpected. Um, the bad was our positioning and our mentality. I mean, everybody is allowed to have off games and games that don't unfold the way you'd like them to unfold. But the pace, the mentality, the lack of aggression, I think that was one of the worst halves I've seen Juventus play this season. And we had a bunch of them. Um,
It seemed like we allowed Monza to opportunities throughout the half to kind of play themselves back into the game and have opportunities. It's just, and look, we talk about sort of Allegri ball and just how brutal it was to watch at times, but no matter what, you get a lead with Allegri, and we often, maybe not last season, but throughout his tenure with 8 years or whatever it was, for the most part, that game is over because of the way we play. Um, you don't let the team grow back in the game. You don't give teams opportunities, and I felt like it was not as controlled or composed in that second half as it should have been for a team of our quality to ensure that the game was closed out.
No, very true, very true. And the analogy with Allegri. I mean, we crucified that guy, and rightfully so at times. Let's be honest, because uh, the games we saw were abysmal at times. But we won games. We won games. It's as simple as that. And one of Allegri's favorite quotes was, "If you want to be entertained, go to the circus." And while he was not right, he wasn't wrong either, because we played abysmal and it was a sight for sore eyes, but we won games. And to draw that comparison now, we are hardly winning any games, and the level of play hasn't drastically changed that much, in my opinion. I can see the differences, and I can see a few silver linings, but the way that you need to watch a game is you need to have that tension, you need to have that flow, that up and down, and that's missing. And like I said, the pace or the lack thereof is also something that frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah, and another thing, and this is maybe a little bit more specific, is we talked about Conceição, like the positioning, the physical demand of his positioning in this game. It was interesting to me that Moto waits till the 85th minute to sub him off for Mbangula. I felt like a sub for Chico, especially, probably should have come a little bit earlier, considering the nature of the game and how, as the game progressed in Monza, we're still very much in the game based on sort of just the phases of play. Putting Mbangula on to run a little bit more, both in a defensive phase as well as maybe in some counterattacking scenarios, would have helped us. Maybe a little bit earlier than the 85th minute. Adzic, just real quick, while we talk about that substitution, came on for Dushan, and I think this is the second game in a row we've seen him. And I think our analysis from the previous one, albeit off just a minimal appearance, that he was very composed on the ball, seemed to ring true again when we saw him in this game. Real comfortable on the ball, composed. He didn't seem like the situation was too big for him, at least in my opinion. What was your take on Odzic now in his second game in a row?
Totally agree, but I'd love to see him get some more minutes. As you said, he came on for Dusan, but again, his minutes were limited, and I feel as a young player, you need to get the minutes you deserve. And I know pre-game, Mota talked about Azic being one of the best in training and one of the most consistent. Well, then, in my opinion, you should give the guys minutes. And the same with Mbangula. I mean, you saw it. Conceição was beat. I mean, you could tell from like the 70th minute where we lost. I don't know against who. I think it was Birindelli as well. He lost a duel, and you could see that he was just exhausted. Okay, I mean that's fine because he played his heart out for 60 minutes. But at least, I mean, have the decency to get him off. I mean, we have a lot of games coming up. Sub him straight away. Mangula has already proven that he can be an added value. So why wait until the 85th minute? It's a real question mark for me.
Two more things I want to note about the game. The first is, while we talk about the Odzic sub, so McKennie starts left back. When Nico is subbed in the 64th minute, McKennie moves into the midfield. And then when Odzic goes on and Dusan comes off, McKennie moves up and is playing, from what I could tell, a striker. And so, we talked about him earlier, but his positional versatility. I think we've given Cambiasso so much, so many plaudits about his. I think we should give McKennie his, equally as much so for his contributions and over the last few games where he's had to really play some weird positions for us, and how well he's doing in that. Second thing I want, and maybe want your take on this because you're tapped in a little bit more on the Italian news front, is Koop Miners very, very visibly was subbed at halftime for Turin. I think there was an injury scare from what I read, and please correct me, but from what I read is that there's, after evaluations, there is no injury concern with Koop Miners, and so much so that he might even play against Fiorentina in our next game. Is that correct?
Yeah, very true. It was just muscle fatigue, and I think Mata took him off as a precaution, which is well because if there's one thing that we can miss right now is another injury. With regards to that, I forgot to mention, or I also have an update about Douglas Lewis because question marks have been raised. Why isn't he coming back? Or why isn't he in shape or whatever? What's going on with him? I did some research, and basically, he was sold to us while having an intramuscularly edema. So he has an intramuscular edema, which is very hard to cure. There are no specific exercises that can help you get rid of that. It's a sort of a chronic injury, and the only thing you can do is differentiate in terms of training and practice, and hope that it goes away. I also spoke to somebody close to the Juventus medical team, and their prognosis is to have that intramuscularly edema completely gone by February. So mystery unraveled.
And February at this point seems pretty far away with the games still yet to play uh, the rest of this month and over the course of January. And that kind of is a perfect segue into just where the standings are. Juventus 17 games in, of course, 7 wins, 10 draws, 0 losses. We're at 31 points, tied with Fiorentina for fifth. Fiorentina has a game in hand, though, and which makes the next meeting, or the next game for both of these clubs against each other so important. Juventus really needs to win that game to get that priority position over Fiorentina in the table. Um, at this point, with Atalanta, Napoli, Inter, positions 1 through 3 might be locked up. Frederic, I think Juventus realistically is playing for fourth, at least in the near term, against Fiorentina and Lazio. Lazio being 3 points ahead of us in the current table. Do you think realistically, leapfrogging Inter or Napoli or Atalanta in that top 2 positions is realistic? Or do you think we're playing for fourth, competing with the likes of Lazio, Fiorentina, and a pretty hot Bologna team that is sitting 3 points behind us with a game in hand?
I don't. I think it's very unrealistic. I think to overtake or leapfrogging Atalanta, Inter, or Napoli is very unrealistic, given the points that we are grossing at this point, and also the style of play that we're embodying. I think we need a lot of work. If you see Atalanta playing, if you see Inter playing, if you see Napoli playing, their tempo, their pace, their aggressiveness is like 3 times ours, and that alone makes a huge difference. I'm not saying that those other teams play wonderful football all the time, because that's not the case. But they win, and they win consistently. Napoli has lost more games than us, but they're still 7 points ahead of us. So that's a contradiction in itself. But if you look at the way they play to win. And that's something that I feel we can do. And I'm going to be pretty honest with you and everybody on the podcast. I don't think if things stagnate or get worse, I don't think we'll reach that top 4 position.
Yeah, we cannot. I mean, if things get worse, there's no way. I think we'd all agree that there's points. A lot teams like Lazio and Fiorentina and Bologna, who've been playing some good ball in general, through Bologna especially recently. They're going to drop points over the course of a season. I think it's inevitable with their squad list, despite the relative consistency we've seen so far. For instance, Fiorentina lost today to Udinese 2-1, and so I think Juventus, the margin of error is zero. Like I think that moving forward, we got to be largely perfect. But I think fourth is definitely realistic, considering the squads we're competing with, considering who Juventus is, and considering the names on our roster. Um, which again, I think hopefully we'll be able to do an episode post Fiorentina, and hopefully it's a win, because that is shaping up to be a real important game in the table at this juncture of the season. And speaking about juncture of the season, I know I've shared my thoughts on the podcast about Malta and on Instagram about Malta several times, but I don't think we've been able to really get your thoughts on what you think of how Malta's done so far from a play style standpoint, from a result standpoint, and maybe any other criteria that you could evaluate Malta. So I kind of wanted to cede the mic to you, Federic, so that you can kind of break down your Malta analysis as we near the midpoint of the season.
Yeah, well, the rumors about Motta joining Juventus started, I think, around February, March last year. And at that point, I started to watch more Bologna games, just as a personal interest and to see, hey, if this gets real, what can this person bring to the table? Because I and many others, we were so tired of Allegri. We had that Allegri fatigue, which was normal because the results weren't coming in. And I think I saw basically all games from Bologna, or the majority of them. And my conclusion was that this is not a coach that is suited for Juventus. That was my conclusion. And I went against the grain because a lot of people were hashtagging Motabol and praising the chef and we're so back and so forth and so forth. But I saw Bologna play and they had a similar style as the Juve that is now playing. The only difference was, and that was my opinion, Bologna had at that time one game a week. So, well, um, in terms of games, they weren't too bothered because they had a week to prepare for each game. They could rest and so forth. And the other thing that came to mind was, well, you had Calafiori, who was an absolute beast. Let's be honest. We even tried to get him in. And you had Zirkzee and another couple of, I think Abisher was a big part of that Bologna renaissance. But Bologna drew a lot and they didn't play attractive football, but there was no pressure. They kept the results. They won a couple of games. They drew a lot, but they kept climbing the table. And that was also a result of other teams not performing. I'm not gonna diminish what Motta did at Bologna, but for me as a coach, I didn't feel it. But I was willing to give him a chance. I mean, I'd take my grandmother over Allegri at that point. So, but then if we look at the things we are doing this season, I mean, we have to be honest. We spent 150 million this summer. 150 million. Okay, then you expect something. And I'm not a patient guy, but I'm willing to give a project or the project that we have right now some time. But after 5 months, I think it's safe to say that we can expect a bit of, uh, yeah, a bit of evolution. And up until this point, game and tactical wise, I haven't seen it. Far from it. The results that we are having now are the worst we've seen in several decades. So the progress to me is a bit lacking, and I don't see him making players better. I would assume that if you train these guys for 5 months now, you could see some progress in some players. And I don't see it because the McKennie that we see now, which is a good McKennie was already the same when he played under Allegri. The same could be said prior to his injury for Bremer. Maybe Vlahovic is performing a bit better, but that's also to do tactic wise, I think. And like I said, I mean, and you said we're going for fourth, which in itself is a bit, I wouldn't say ridiculous, but it feels like a bit of a shame if your sporting director at the beginning of the season says, look, our goal is a number four position. And I completely agree and understand that Inter, Napoli are teams that are at this point better than us. It takes time to leapfrog them. You can't expect any wins or any cups overnight. But the thing that frustrates me most is the lack of progress. And this is something, this is, well, un-Juventus. I mean, you should play to win. You should play for those titles. And nobody will hold it against you if you don't win those titles, especially in your first year. But can we at least start by winning from the likes of Venezia, the likes of Cagliari, the likes of Parma, the likes of Lecce, the likes of uh, Monza, which we did, albeit not convincingly. Um, I sometimes watch a game and feel like, whoa, did we become Udinese overnight? Where's my Juve? And another thing that for me is a big issue is the communication with Mota. Every pre-match conference he has, every post-match interview he has, it's always the same. It's always the same standardized phrases. We should have done better. Um, we are content, but no, you shouldn't be content. You're coaching Juventus. You're not coaching Bologna. If you fail to win against a side that is ranked 16th or 17th in the league, and you give a post match interview and you say, "Well, we're content with the draw, but we should have won." I mean, that's taking a piss. That's just fooling everybody in and around Juventus, and that starts from a hierarchy point. I think we lack a president that's Juventino through and through. The president we have right now is put there by Alcon to keep the numbers in check, to keep all our accounting in check, and to basically fix errors that were made in the past. But I don't see a president or a sporting director that embodies the Juve spirit, and I don't see it in the coach as well. And at times, I don't see it on the pitch and the players as well. And this, for me, is a huge red flag at this moment.
It seems inconsistent at times where you have those ties that you listed against those teams that are in the bottom of the table, and then when we see the team play against Inter, um, the team play against Leipzig, the team play against Man City, the team play against PSV, and it's almost the season to me has seemed like a tale of two teams where you've seen that energy and that control, that composure, that resilience, whatever word or combination of words you want to use. In those games that I listed, there was just so much character in the play. Recovering from a red card and a penalty against Leipzig, recovering from two penalties against Inter, dominating your first Champions League game against PSV, going up against an albeit out of form City team, and so thoroughly dominating that game as well. You just didn't. We haven't been seeing those teams against the more provincial sides, and I do think it comes down to coaching and consistency. Um, you know, when you think of what made Bologna tick, and certainly expectations are different, and I agree with you 100%. Were Juventus playing for fourth almost seems sacrilegious. Um, but when you look from a squad standpoint at that Bologna team, their engines were Calafiori. You highlighted Abishir, but also Lewis Ferguson in the midfield and Xerxes up front, sort of the spine of their team. I think if you look at our equivalents, you might say Kalulu or Cambiaso are fitting that Calafiori role, and I would argue, and that Cambiaso at least is filling that role really successfully. In the midfield, your Lewis Ferguson and your Abishur. You talk about maybe Malta not improving a lot of players. Well, one player that's unequivocally done better this year is you have Locatelli. Then you have guys like Douglas Luiz and Coop Miners, who are supposed to kind of be also that other midfield role. And obviously, we've talked about some of their struggles. And I think maybe the most notable difference is, for that from that Xerxes equivalent is we just don't have one. We know that Dushan's strengths don't lie in his build-up play or his passing. In fact, game in, game out, it almost seems painful to watch at times him try to fill that role. Um, and I think if my take, and I take a slightly different from yours is I think we've done really well in almost every phase of play. Possession stats, our tackling stats are pretty good. We build the ball up pretty well from the back and through the midfield. It's just mental errors, and that is on the coach as well as the personnel and the defense to give up stupid goals or stupid penalties. And most importantly, our lack of attacking bite that has caused us to tie so many games that we should otherwise have won, dropping just an astronomical amount of points at this stage of the season. I think as we dip into the second half of the season, We get further into the Copa. We finish the group stage of this new form Champions League. I think we can all agree that we need to see a more clean play at the back and a more biting play in the front, or this Juventus team, as we talked about the table, it won't finish fourth in the Champions League spot, and that'll put the management and Mota in a very, very tough position and have to make some very tough, have some very tough conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that worries me the most is, and once again, I'm not being negative for the sake of being negative, but if we spend 150 million and we're still left with a team that is not well assorted and where we have players lacking in several positions, even prior to the injuries. I mean, if you're totally honest, we started the season with one deep striker, which is Vlahovic. We don't have any alternatives. If you start the season knowing full on that you have four competitions that you're competing in, excluding the World Cup this summer, then something is off. Something is most definitely off. And is that a lack of synergy between Mota and Giuntoli? Is that a lack of vision by Giuntoli himself? I don't know. I just know that the expectations were high, maybe too high. But I think we must expect and demand a Juve side that can beat the likes of Monza, the likes of Venezia, the likes of Lecce, which we haven't been able to do. And I don't think splurging again during the winter transfer window will improve that. I don't think there's a magic solution. You can buy player X or Y and then the team automatically just rolls forward. I think it's and that's my personal opinion once again. I think it's a mental issue and the fact that Mota doesn't have as much grip on the dressing room as I think he has. And that's a very dangerous take and also a very dangerous position because I don't see Mota interfering. Like his substitutions at times are woeful. I think we can all agree on that. Sometimes the things that he does, also the fact that he lets players play out of position, which can come in handy for a McKennie, but not everyone is as versatile as McKennie. I think I saw Fagioli yesterday as a striker with McKennie at a certain point. That makes you wonder. That makes you wonder, and that makes you question his ability to train a team as great because we're still a great squad. We're a legendary team or legendary club. But it makes you wonder, is Mota capable enough to handle that pressure and to deliver? Because we have to deliver. Because if we don't make fourth place and we don't qualify for the Champions League, then we're in for a very, very rough financial 2 to 3 years yet again. And that is something that we must avoid at all costs. And I'm on a Italian forum, a Juventus fan forum. I'm not gonna name it. Not gonna publish any other names, but they ran a quote and a poll, and poll basically said, "Should we sack Mota if the results remain what they are throughout January?" Because January is a very important month, and 86%, and there are, I think, 130,000 members of that forum. 86% said yes, definitely. So not only is Mota losing a bit of his grip on the team, as far as I see it, but I think he's losing a bit of the faith of the fans as well. And those are two very, very, very nasty things going into this January killer month.
Now I was going to move on, but you mentioning sacking Mota, that's just absurd to me. Like I understand as a Juventus team, you're expecting a certain level of results, right? You're expecting to win always. That's the Juventus way. That is the expectations we should always have to maintain. Like you said, our status as a legendary club. But change doesn't happen overnight. We all want it to, but it doesn't. Change is often painful, sometimes ugly, expensive, and regrettably time consuming. And attacking Malta after one season, and I'm just going to kind of extend to the end of the season, that isn't as successful as we want, is just repeating the mistakes that we did with Pirlo and Sarri. If you're going to sack Allegri and you're going to move to Malta to, at least as they say to us, to find this new phase of Juventus's history with this sort of quote unquote modern football, well, then you back your manager and you back your play and you back your transfer market. You do not reactionarily go out and fire folks and start the process all over again. That's just absurd. I
I
think I'll be the first person to be upset and call out Multa and call it the boys if this team doesn't finish top four. But that sacking the manager for that just seems ridiculous, and it's just asking us to keep the cycle of I was going to say mediocrity, above averageness, or whatever we want to call the last several years. That cycle is going to continue until we back a horse and we see what they do, and that's not going to happen within 5 months. Just full stop.
I completely agree with you on that point, but two questions come to mind. Like you say, management needs to back him, and that's true. My question to that is, where is Juntuli every post game? I think Juntuli reads the papers as well, and he's aware of the position that we're in at this point. But I never ever heard him say like, "Look, whatever happens, even if we finish last, Mota's here to stay," because that would clear the air as well. Then we'd all be like, "Okay, they made their bed, they're gonna lay in it, they're gonna support him through thick and thin," which is fine. And then you have to change a bit of the perspectives and maybe your goals as well. And that's fine. That I could totally agree with. But I don't hear him say it. And the second thing is, I feel as though the state that we're in at this point, or the lack of play that we're showing, or the lack of results that are coming in, is basically, well, it's always the case in football, 70% on Mota. I think we can agree with that, and I think it needs time. But my question is, when is he going to intervene? When is he going to start maybe something new, or start, I don't know, even the formation? I mean, why not push that 4-3-3, that flat 4-3-3? Try it, give it a go. Who knows? It could be the thing that sets us free. But he keeps holding on to this 4-3-2-1, or 4-3-2-1 that he's a fan of, and he doesn't change any aspects of that. And I think if you want to see change, and if you want to see a change in results and a change in style of play, you as a manager have to be the first person to say, okay, look, we're going to do things differently. We're going to try something differently. There's no shame in losing when you're trying, but I think that the general consensus of the fans right now is he even trying? Is he willing to get out of his comfort zone, try a new formation, or try something new just to obtain those results? And I have, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just I think if you want to talk about communication from the club, communication and transparency about Malta, transparency and communication about some of these injuries, like the Douglas Luiz situation and the like, I'm not going to fight you on that. I think you could always use more transparency in that regard, and that would definitely help, kind of from a visibility standpoint, from a fan standpoint, support Malta. But when you talk about tactical flexibility, first and foremost, and I'm not using what I'm about to say as an excuse for our results. I'm not. But when you ask for tactical flexibility and you only have 4 outfield players on your bench for the last month, there's only so much you can do. And I'd argue that moving McKennie to left back, putting Coop Miners deeper, moving Nico Gonzalez now that he's back into and before him even Yildiz into the 10 position, is him trying to weigh it forward, or him trying to use what little healthy players he has in creative ways to try to get us over the hump or whatever's been holding us back. So I'd argue that, with only 15 outfield players healthy for every game for the last month, he's probably doing the best he can. And when you take even a further step back, and you mentioned it, you enter the season with 1 healthy striker, and you with 1 fullback on the whole roster. I mean, I guess when Savona and Ruhi count, but Cabal and Danilo are both center backs. You end the season with 1 fullback and 1 striker. It's just you're already starting from a team that's incomplete in its rebuild. And when I say, like, if we were you said if even if we finished last, we'd back Malta or something along those lines. This rebuild, and we called it out in preseason, is not one that happens automatically. Yes, a lot of money was spent. A lot of players were brought in, but this is not complete. Vlahovic is not a Malta striker, or not a Malta striker yet. We have no fullbacks on this roster. We still have work to do in that regard. And so, and we'll close this matter now because our episode is going a little bit longer. But
Sorry.
sacking him. It's okay. I mean, we have opinions on this. I know other people do too. So it has to be. We have to discuss it. But I think sacking him would just be, in light of all of that, absurd. I think, assuming our team starts to get healthy as we sit at the pivot point in our season, enter the second half, I think we're all clamoring for a better product on the field over the next several months to close out the season. And that kind of makes, go ahead.
Can I ask you one question? I know it's a bit controversial, but let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say that, at the end of the season, it doesn't end well. We don't get the Champions League position. And the board decides yet again to fire a coach. And they sack Motta. Who would you pick if you could pick any coach from the world that is still practicing football as a coach? Who would you pick, or who do you see as the ultimate coach that could make us regain our infamous notoriety as a football team?
See, this is kind of a disingenuous question, I think, because we have a brand new coach. We have a coach, and as a fan, I'm not anybody in or out, because I have no control over it. But I get to choose how I respond to what the team is doing, and I choose to respond to support the team that we have. I think when we start getting into conversations of, should we sell this player, should we sell that player, and maybe that's a little bit easier. But when we get into should we sack this coach or hire that coach, I think it shows. Because the coach controls so much from a tactical and personnel front, it just shows a lack of faith in the project. If we were in the third year of Allegri, I would have no problem answering that question. But in the first 5 months of Mota, I'm not going to answer that question, because my answer is I want Mota to succeed. I want Mota to succeed at Juventus, and I want this team to grow and show evidence of growth over the rest of this season. And that's kind of what I'm going to be looking to see from this team, as it hopefully, knocking on wood, crossing fingers, or whatever I need to do to get them healthy, right? As soon as people get healthy, Mota has more options. Mota's able to rotate more. That we start showing a full 90 minutes of good football, as well as consistency in the back and some notable attacking bite. So I won't be heard talking about any other coach than Mota for the rest of this season, because I'm going to back the team that we have and the vision that we have to what point that it is no longer appropriate to do so.
Thank you. That was a very, very, very good and a very well thought out answer. As for the president, would you like to see a return of Agnelli?
Oh, you're getting in all the controversial questions today. In the interest of time, I'm going to say no, and say that my reason, and this is a big time, abridged version of my answer. But I think when you are looking about moving forward and moving a team forward, and thinking of new visions and new ideas, then going backwards is, even if it was going back to individuals that made you successful in the past, is not evidence of progression. And so I'd like to leave, think of our Allegri time, think of his first tenure, think of Agnelli for some of the good that he did. It's definitely not all good, but some of the good that he did, and kind of leave that in the past and look forward at what this new Juventus is, and what is that going to be? Where do we fit in it, and where does success lie?
Completely.
So no more controversial questions.
No.
No more controversial questions.
I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Well, like I said, next game is against Fiorentina. Big game for the sake of the table. I just want to super quickly, I know this is getting quite long, give a quick update. We love to do this. Juventus men's team is not the only team in the Juventus family. So I'd like to quickly hit on a couple of the other teams that we have out there. We've got, of course, the Juve women's team, who is top of Serie A by 7 points, had 11 wins, 2 draws, 0 losses. Unfortunately, they've finished third in their Champions League group stage. The Women's Champions League is not this new version that we see in the men's game. It's still the old group stage format. They finished third behind Arsenal and Bayern, but they are absolutely dominating Serie A. They've got 9 goal contributions from Cristiana Girelli, Ariana Caruso, and 8 from Sofia Cantori. So they're playing some good ball. They've got some really good contributions from from a wide range of their players. And they're pretty exciting to watch. Definitely tune in if you get the opportunity. Next up, we've got Juventus Next Gen. As many of y'all know, Paulo Montero, their coach, was fired in mid-November. Since his sacking, this team has gone 3-2-1 to climb out of 20th place in their group of Serie C. They're now 17th and having a little bit, or getting closer to have a little bit more breathing room when it comes to, possible relegation. A couple players to note in their roster that have been playing well. Martin Palumbo, with a midfielder, has been playing well all season. More recently, Luis Semedo, Simone Guerra, and Felix Sefenagian have all been very good on the attacking side of the ball. And last but not least, why not throw up some Primavera U20? Good attacking team, sitting currently 6th at 29 points, 7 behind the Primavera leaders of Roma's under-20 team. But I like to keep a tab on them and some of their good players, because ultimately they, presumably would fill in the next gen in the future. So that's our quick round table of the other Juventus teams. Yeah. It's really fun to watch. I love watching any of the Juventus teams I can, the Primavera teams. There's definitely more raw. I think our under-20 team, and this may not surprise folks, does have a penchant for red cards.
Yeah.
So if any of y'all get the opportunity to watch teams within the Juventus family, definitely encourage you to do so. Alrighty, well, this has wrapped up an hour-long episode with Zach and Frederic. I really appreciate all of your time. We really can't be said enough how much we appreciate our listeners. We love to engage with y'all. Please hit us up on Instagram. The folks on our team that manage that are always quick to respond and or send messages to us to respond for them. So we all love to engage with y'all. So please do not hesitate to reach out and continue this discussion. I think Frederic raised some really interesting questions on this episode. Please send your thoughts to our Instagram page at Turin Giants so that we can continue that discussion there. But I think that's enough from us today. Frederic, thank you so much for joining us. For the rest of you, thank you for listening. Have a lovely holiday season and New Year's from wherever you are and whatever you're celebrating. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon after a win against Fiorentina. All right, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thunderstruck.